She stepped out into the morning sunlight and into a darkness America still can't explain. April 2011. The soft light of dawn filtered through the pine trees in the quiet town of Darden, Tennessee. It was a day like any other, except for one chilling fact. A young woman, well-loved and known for her kindness, walked out of her house and never came back. Holly Bobo was a nursing student, the kind of person who packed lunches for patients and said, "Yes, ma'am," even to strangers. She wasn't the type to cause trouble. She wasn't the type to run away. And she definitely wasn't the type to vanish in broad daylight, right in front of her brother. Clint, Holly's older brother, saw her walking into the woods behind their home with a man in camouflage. At the time, he thought it was her boyfriend. But just an hour later, blood was found in the carport, and Holly's phone started moving, in a direction no one expected. For more than 2 years, Holly's family was left with nothing but fragments, an abandoned lunchbox, a SIM card removed from her phone, and witness statements that never lined up. But then, in a dense forest 20 miles away, searchers uncovered something undeniable. Holly's skull, with a bullet lodged in the back of her head. Holly Lynn Bobo was born and raised in a town where everyone knew each other's names, where dinner was still served at 6 p.m., and the mailman still stopped to chat at every house. She was the youngest child in a close-knit Southern family. Her father worked as a mechanic, her mother was a school teacher, and her brother Clint, the last person to see her alive, had once been a high school baseball star. Holly was 20, studying to become a nurse at a nearby community college. She loved animals, sang in the church choir, and always brought a packed lunch, sometimes for patients, sometimes for her boyfriend. In a place like that, no one worried about Holly. She wasn't reckless, she didn't party, and she definitely wasn't the type to run away. So when the news broke that Holly was missing, the whole town seemed to stop breathing. People poured into the streets to search. T-shirts bearing her face were handed out for free. Her story rippled across the state like waves in a pond. But beneath that wave of solidarity, quiet questions began to surface. Why did she leave the house without saying a word? Why was there blood in the carport, yet no one heard a scream? And why did her brother think the man in camouflage was Holly's boyfriend? They lived under the same roof, shared the same dinner table. So how could Clint have been wrong? Her mother later said Holly had seemed anxious the night before, but when asked, she just smiled and said everything was fine. No one knew that the next morning, Holly would disappear in just 90 seconds. Not nearly enough time to run, but more than enough time to be taken. April 13th, 2011, began like any other morning in the Bobo household. Holly was up early, studying for an upcoming nursing exam. She put on a pink shirt and jeans, packed her lunch, a routine she never broke. On her way out, she stopped in the kitchen to chat with her mom, then had a short phone call with her boyfriend. There was a bit of tension between them. Nothing major, just a few sharp words, but it left a feeling of something unfinished. At 7:42 a.m., Holly's phone sent its final message. Just minutes later, her brother Clint, getting ready for work, heard a scream, a sharp, startled cry, then silence. He looked out the window and saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Holly, walking into the woods with a man in camouflage. She wasn't struggling, wasn't screaming, but Clint said she looked uneasy. She said, "No, why?" From that distance, in those few fleeting seconds, Clint assumed the man was her boyfriend. So he didn't call out. He didn't follow. He let them disappear behind the trees. An hour later, blood was found near the garage, and Clint began to realize the man he saw wasn't Holly's boyfriend. At the time, Holly's mother, Karen, was at work nearby. She, too, heard her daughter scream through the phone. She was the first to call 911. Police arrived within 30 minutes, but Holly was gone. From the moment she stepped outside to the time officers arrived, only about 90 minutes had passed. And in that short span, a young woman was swallowed by the Tennessee countryside. No engine noise, no security camera, no witnesses, except her brother. What stunned everyone was this. The last person to see Holly was someone who lived in the same house. But even he wasn't sure what he saw. When the first units arrived, they found no clear trail leading away from the home. But just a few feet away, behind the garage, sunlight revealed a smear of blood drying in the dirt. It wasn't a large amount, but it couldn't be ignored. With her medical background, Holly's mother knew that wasn't from a scratch. Someone was hurt, and she feared that someone was her daughter. The official search launched that very morning. Hundreds of volunteers joined, along with tracking dogs, aerial drones, horseback units, combing every inch of the woods, but there was nothing. No footprints, no torn clothing, no sign of struggle. Until they checked her phone data. Holly's phone, the one she always kept close, stayed active for several hours after she vanished. And that's when things took a turn. Tower pings showed the phone traveling southwest, cutting through back roads and rural stretches, eventually stopping near a sparse forest in Decatur County. Then, silence. The phone was never turned on again. No one saw a suspicious vehicle. No one heard a scream. Authorities still don't know what kind of transport was used, but it was clear Holly had been taken, quickly, quietly, and with chilling precision. Days later, a few items were found that might be connected. Holly's lunchbox, abandoned 15 miles from her home on an old, rarely used trail. A receipt bearing her name inside a plastic bag nearby. And most unsettling, a SIM card, removed from a phone, lying alone beneath a bed of damp leaves. Police chased every lead, but each one felt like it was designed to mislead, part truth, part trap. Every clue opened a door that led to another wall. Holly's boyfriend was questioned, but had a solid alibi. Her brother Clint became the quiet center of suspicion, not charged, not accused, but whispered about, and the town began to divide. Some believed it was a random kidnapping. Others said, "There's no one around here who doesn't know the Bobo family. If someone hurt Holly, they might not have come from far away." By the second week, no one was calling it a routine missing persons case anymore. Holly Bobo's story had made national headlines, but the more attention it got, the more tangled it became. Investigators continued to circle those closest to Holly, her boyfriend, classmates, neighbors, and especially her brother, Clint. Clint Bobo told police he'd woken up that morning to the sound of dogs barking, followed by a short scream. Through the window, he saw his sister walking into the woods with a man in camouflage. The man stood close beside her, but showed no obvious signs of aggression. Clint said he assumed it was Holly's boyfriend, so he didn't intervene. But when police compared the timeline to the boyfriend's statement, confirming he was attending school in another town that morning, suspicions began to form. Why didn't someone living in the same house, someone who saw his sister being led away, call or even step outside? That question spread through the community like wildfire. Some defended Clint, saying he was confused, in shock, and had no idea what he was witnessing. Others asked bluntly, how does a brother not realize his sister's in danger? Then came a surprising witness. A neighbor claimed he'd seen a strange man standing near the Bobo home that morning. He was beside a white vehicle, which vanished before police arrived. But the man's description didn't match Holly's boyfriend, and it didn't match Clint either. Stranger still, the neighbor didn't report this for nearly a week. Meanwhile, a strange tip reached the investigation team from a small roadside station about 25 miles from the scene. A gas station clerk reported seeing a frightened-looking blonde girl sitting in a pickup truck between two men. When she tried to get a closer look, the truck peeled away. That girl might have been Holly, but in one of many cruel twists, the station's security camera had broken that exact day. Each piece of the puzzle, witness statements, vague sightings, scattered clues, seemed to float around each other without ever locking in place. And just as hope began to fade, a new name surfaced inside internal police memos: Terry Britt. Terry was a middle-aged man who lived just a few miles from the Bobo family. His past was full of red flags, sex offense convictions, trespassing arrests, even allegations of stalking women in the area. Locals knew him, and they knew the law rarely reached men like him. Britt matched the neighbor's description: white male, average build, known to drive a light-colored truck and often seen wearing camouflage. Even more compelling, his cell phone pinged off a tower near the Bobo home the morning Holly vanished. So why wasn't Terry Britt arrested? Because he had an alibi, given by his wife. She told police that Britt was home the entire morning, fixing their back door. No one else confirmed it, but no one could disprove it either. It wasn't enough for an arrest, and so Terry Britt remained free, while public outrage swelled. One investigator, who later spoke anonymously, put it simply: we knew something was off, but we didn't have enough to pull the trigger. The fear of arresting the wrong man kept their hands tied. But that begged a darker question. If it wasn't Britt, then who was it? Soon, yet another troubling detail emerged. A security camera, mounted on a home near the woods where Holly was last seen, had lost power the night before. No electrical issues, no recorded outages, just shut off. The homeowner told police, "In all the years I've had that system, nothing like this ever happened." As national media dug deeper, the story of a young woman taken in broad daylight, right from her own community, began shifting into something murkier. A story of silence, of broken cameras, delayed witnesses, conflicting accounts, and suspects walking free. Some began to ask the unthinkable. Was someone deliberately misdirecting the investigation? Or was this simply a case too complex, too shadowed, to untangle? Eventually, as the press lost interest and the public moved on, a single anonymous phone call reached police. It named someone entirely new, a man who lived over 30 miles away, someone with a distant but real connection to Holly's brother. 2 years had passed since Holly Bobo vanished. Her family kept her room exactly the same. The t-shirts printed with her face had faded, prayer circles still met each month, but there were no new leads, until one March afternoon in 2014, when an anonymous phone call changed everything. The caller didn't give a name. They just said, "You're looking in the wrong place. Someone local knows something. Ask about Dylan." Dylan Adams, a name that wasn't new to investigators. He was the younger brother of Zach Adams, a man already well known to police for drugs, assaults, and a long history of violence. The Adams family lived about 15 miles from the Bobo home, tucked away in a forgotten stretch of rural backroads. Dylan was brought in for questioning. He was nervous, his speech scattered, and he showed signs of cognitive impairment. It wasn't until the third interview that he said something that stunned everyone. "I saw Holly at my brother's house. She was being hit." That single sentence blew the case wide open and ignited a storm of controversy. Dylan had no lawyer present. The interrogation wasn't fully recorded, and what he said, it came out in fragments, unclear, confused, sometimes contradictory. Still, based on that statement, police obtained a search warrant and raided Zach Adams's property. They didn't find a body, no blood, no clear forensic evidence. But they did find weapons, drugs, and deleted messages that raised flags. For the prosecution, it was enough. Zach Adams was arrested, charged with kidnapping and murder. At the same time, two other names emerged, Jason Autry and Shane Austin, friends of Zach's with their own criminal pasts. Then came the twist. Autry offered to cooperate in exchange for a lighter sentence. And what he told prosecutors took the case in a direction no one expected. He said that on the day Holly disappeared, Zach had called him for help, to get rid of a body. Jason Autry was no hero. He'd been in and out of prison, known for drugs, theft, and running his mouth faster than his mind. But with the death penalty looming, he chose the path many before him had taken, testify for the state. Autry claimed that Zach led him to a remote spot near the river. There, wrapped in a blanket, was an unconscious young woman. According to Autry, Zach said she was some girl who saw too much. Then came the moment that chilled everyone. They opened the blanket and realized she was still alive. Autry said Zach pulled out a gun, ready to kill her right there. But Autry claimed he stopped him. They panicked, argued, and put her back in the truck. What happened next? Autry's account faded into vagueness at the most critical moment. The next day, Holly was still missing. And weeks later, Autry's statement was sealed. Prosecutors called it their ace in the hole. But there was a problem. No physical evidence, no DNA, no blood, no trace of Holly connected Zach or Autry to the crime. The entire case hinged on the word of two troubled men. One with limited mental capacity, the other trying to trade a confession for a reduced sentence. Holly's family was torn. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. But they began to wonder, was justice being forced into place, no matter how it got there? Zach's defense attorney argued that his client was the perfect scapegoat, a man with a shady past, disliked by many, and with no one to defend him. Police needed a name, he said, and Zach was the easiest one to give them. Public opinion split. Some believed Autry's testimony had finally solved the mystery. Others pointed out the obvious. When a man is trying to escape death row, will he tell the truth, or just tell a story that saves his life? The case seemed stuck, until a hunter wandered into the woods near Decatur County, an area that had already been searched dozens of times. Among the roots of ancient oak trees, he noticed something odd in the soil. A a skull, and part of a femur. In that moment, everything changed. On September 7th, 2014, a hunter was walking through the woods near Decatur County, a place he'd passed many times before. But this time, something felt different. Beneath a layer of decaying leaves, he noticed a slight depression in the soil. Curious, he knelt down and uncovered a small bone fragment. Then, something unmistakable. A human skull fractured at the back. Police were called immediately. Forensics confirmed it was the skull of Holly Bobo, with clear evidence of a gunshot wound to the back of the neck. Nearby, they found a broken piece of a small caliber hunting rifle, rusted but still identifiable. No clothing, no phone, no personal belongings. Just the skull, a few pieces of femur and shoulder bone, and the thick silence of the woods that had kept its secret hidden for more than 3 years. The autopsy concluded Holly was likely killed within hours of her disappearance. But the spot where she was buried wasn't the place she'd been attacked. Someone had moved her body across multiple locations before choosing this remote patch of land, off the main road, but not entirely isolated. Prosecutors wasted no time. They declared, "The skull is the final proof. Now we know she's dead and Zach was the last one connected." But the problem was, there was still no direct evidence linking Zach Adams to the remains. No DNA, no fingerprints, no witness who actually saw Holly in Zach's presence. Just the word of Jason Autry, a man trying to escape the death penalty. In court, Autry told his full story. How Zach called him that morning, how he found Holly alive and wrapped in a blanket, how they panicked, and how Zach pulled the trigger. He claimed he helped Zach dispose of the body. But during cross-examination, the defense asked one simple question. "Can anyone else confirm your story?" Autry was silent. His testimony became the backbone of the state's case, but the jury's doubts weren't about Zach. They were about Autry himself. On one hand, his story was chillingly vivid, down to the smell of the body and the riverbank where they'd planned to dump her. On the other hand, he couldn't remember exact dates, specific locations, or even the moment the gun was fired. The more he was pressed, the more his details shifted. When asked, "Are you sure Holly was alive when you saw her?" he replied, "I think so." Everything lived in a gray area of maybe. Then came another jarring inconsistency, the weapon. Autry described a shotgun, but forensic experts determined the bullet came from a different type, a smaller caliber typically used for hunting small game, not powerful enough to destroy a skull. Yet Holly's skull was shattered at the back. It looked like the shot had come from a different weapon, or at point-blank range. The question loomed. Was Zach really the one who pulled the trigger? Or was Autry telling only the version that would save his life? Meanwhile, Dylan Adams, the first to say Holly had been seen at Zach's house, suddenly recanted. After months in custody, he told a different story. He'd been pressured. He didn't fully understand what he was signing. Dylan's attorney submitted medical evaluations. His IQ was below average. He was highly suggestible, prone to panic, and likely to say whatever someone wanted, just to end the questioning. The court refused to strike his earlier statement, but from that moment on, every piece of evidence against Zach was secondhand, passed from mouth to mouth. And the public? More divided than ever. One side argued, Zach has a dark past. Trouble follows him for a reason. The other said, having a record doesn't make you guilty of this. Then, in 2023, a twist no one saw coming. Jason Autry filed a motion in court. He formally recanted the testimony that had convicted Zach Adams. His reason? He said he'd been pressured into cooperating. He had told prosecutors what they wanted to hear, and now his conscience wouldn't let him stay silent. Once again, the Holly Bobo case was turned upside down. Zach, serving a life sentence, filed for appeal. Prosecutors pushed back. The verdict was rendered. We won't reopen a case just because one man changed his story. And the public? All that remained was a single, haunting feeling. No one really knows what happened to Holly Bobo. More than a decade has passed since Holly Bobo stepped out of her home, carrying a packed lunch and a dream of becoming a nurse. Today, her backpack still sits on the shelf, covered in dust. The family still checks the mailbox each week, just in case a letter was sent to the wrong address. And Holly's room remains exactly as it was that last morning, neat, simple, with the faint scent of youthful perfume lingering in the air. Zach Adams is currently serving a life sentence, while Jason Autry, the man whose testimony helped convict him, has now said, "I'm not sure anymore. Maybe I was wrong." Dylan Adams has all but disappeared into the system. The statements once used to implicate him are now considered possibly invalid. But no one has been exonerated, and no one has been officially declared innocent either. Holly's skull still rests with the Tennessee medical examiner. Her family has asked to bring her home for a proper burial, but the case file remains open. Debates continue. Should the remains be retested? Should the case be reopened? What was once considered closed has now returned to square one. Multiple names, conflicting theories, and no certainty. What's even more unsettling is this. Despite the full weight of the system, the FBI, state police, attorneys, the press, and hundreds of volunteers, we still don't know what really happened in those woods that morning. No cameras, no clear witnesses, no confession. Just a kind-hearted girl who vanished in the morning sun and was found beneath the earth 3 years later. She once told her mom, "I'm okay, Mom," and that was the last thing Holly Bobo ever left behind.